Hello, I think we begin. This is a lecture on projection mapping, which leads us to talk about public arts, urban public arts. So it kind of involves both of the classes I'm teaching right now. I'm going to provide you with some examples of projection mapping I've done. Um, my THR 103 class, I've asked you to assemble some video textures, like six of them, something like that, 5, 6 seconds long, out in nature, put filters over them, um, choose something from YouTube, do a compare and contrast between something that is biomorphic, relating to nature, and something that's more hard edged, related to culture or technology or the culture of technology. So, what is projection mapping? This is a kind of a brand new field. Most graduate programs teach it, undergraduate programs. It's a viable form of income, it's a small market, but a lot of people are doing it. So am I. So here is an example of the facade in the old library, which is now an events hall in downtown Denver. I've worked with Vision Box, and they were um, allowed, or this is one of their spaces to which within which they perform. This production was Romeo and Juliet. The idea was to uh, start a concert, small quartet, jazz, uh, an orchestra, classical music, something like that, in front of this structure. Now, typically, with all the elements in place, this is a Shakespearean play reduced down. It's called the Capulet Ball. It's only dealing with the ball element within Romeo and Juliet, the moment within which both of them meet um, at the ball. Coming out of COVID, this was last year, the idea was to explode back into the public again, that the public is about meeting, it's about romance, it's about accident, it's about cosmopolitanism, it's about all these things. So therefore, um, we part of the artistic discussion of what should happen is that this public, Denver public, should meet on the outside of this beautiful McCarran library space. It's no longer a library, but it's an event. They cleared out all the books, which is a part of the threaded discussion on the space and urban renewal. I was told, I didn't make it there beforehand, that the park was filled with unfortunate people who lost their houses during COVID or before. So over behind it somewhere are a bunch of kind of a tent city, homeless people like you see in LA, and you see homeless in New York, but you don't see tents on this street. So this has something to do with the relationship of the city being by participated in by vast number of people, um, uh, employed people, unemployed people, landed people, non-landed people, kids who are going to this drama school that Vision Box operates, Shakespearean and Stanislavskian drama training in this vibrant, dynamic city in the smack dab in the middle of the North American continent. You see the mountains in the back. Denver has a bunch of other performance venues like Red Rocks, the Denver Center. So there's a wedding with nature, but what is this also wedding with culture is ambiguous because it also involves voracious land speculation. The rents are going up. So again, post COVID, we see the public space in and with a strain. One of the ideas. So to begin with, the elements. Also, there's an entity called Immersa, which is about immersive environments. One of the oldest in the country, if not the world. It's in a projection dome, which I propose some things for, which might go on this within the next year. This relates to Art Tech House, what goes on in there as an immersive environment, as a projected media environment, but an immersive environment. It's an exciting new world. It's basically scenography with projected media. It is relates to narrative or abstract. It has a dialogue with architecture. As you can see, this neoclassical architecture, I don't know what those columns are, not Corinthian. But I imagine this is part of the Carnegie Library system, within which Andrew Carnegie devoted 3,000 libraries across the country. I know in the small towns in Minnesota, they had, like Mankato and Minneapolis had a few. You can find them everywhere. I found one or two in Brooklyn. They're all kind of the same size, neoclassical Andrew Carnegie, of big old robber baron from the turn of the century, Scottish steel guy who came to America to make his fortune. And then he donated these things, which in some respect is seeding the ground for teaching his managerial class how to use a public library. So there were benefits. But anyway, this was the library. Within this is the performance, which also had projection environments within it. If I call this up on YouTube, I can also show Art Tech House in Manhattan, Miami, LA, Washington, D.C. There's one. So now, without further ado, projection mapping is taking over the design world. Here's a movie I made of the facade, what would happen with these more or less non-objective, abstract, sort of eye candy things. Admittedly, they were supposed to speak of an Italian landscape, but also speak of abstract forms from a ways away, create a kind of a stunning view on the facade. For this, because we had limited software sharing, I was preparing the films here in New York and they were implementing them in Denver. Um, I decided to use Keynote as a projection mapping program. A part of this lecture will go over just what programs you can use. As you see here, there's a slowness to the tempo, as a band, an orchestra, jazz ensemble. I never got versions of the final on that. Was performing. Here's the Italian Gardens in back, reminiscent of the Capulets. This is projected across with higher lumen projectors, both abstract and naturals. Things I've asked you to do with your um, projection mapping, just going out and getting your own video textures. So here I have the golden section. Here I have older paintings that I stylized and put it in filters. And you can imagine this while a band is playing outside before the thing. Drinks, refreshments, things that make a city beautiful. Okay, so this was a gig last summer, uh, and again, I don't know how much of this was implemented because I did the gig and received compensation at a distance. It was filmed, it was set up with a brief, and so forth. Let's go on. Here is the keynote document. So let's, I'm not going to play this, but because it'll take over my B screen on the laptop. Rick and I just worked out some basic uncued projection mapping from for earlier production about an hour ago, about a month ago. Um, and in Orieta's Theater Lab's big white space, it was wonderful. We had 3 to 4 2600 lumen to 3600 lumen projectors, which are now maybe about $600 each. The function of projection mapping, the result, the evidence of, is a function of Moore's law too. As soon as these projectors, high lumen projectors, became more inexpensive, they were used over and over again. And of course, this is a little bit of an attack on wood and glue and nails and whatever, creating a set that way, which I tend to shy away from because it's very labor intensive, unkind to the earth. It chews up materials, usually destroyed afterward. Usually I aim for unit sets and let the audience's imagination fill in after that. The concept of setting up a projector mapping space, once you get the codes and clearances from the civic participation, is fairly easy once you own or rent the projectors. Rentals are still pretty high. I tend to test the environment. There are a number of variables: how much light leakage there is, when does the sun go down, what are the competing lumens, what's the subject matter. With the art on these, I tend to pump up the contrast because you're also usually projecting against a medium ground, even dark ground surface, like we'll see in some of the videos that people are using. So this is what I wanted you to do with your, and let's see, we grabbed this one, and these are all simple. There's the pillars beneath it, and there are ways within Keynote. Let's move it over. That you can turn to animate and, oops, let's go back. We'll give it a preview, preview. Yeah, that's just, here it is, yes. Coming in and out. Let's go to the next slide. I have these circles. I wanted to contrast these circles. Oops, sorry. These types of circles in this. Let's see. We have the duration on this. Let's preview this. Preview again. And once those films and images come up, they play and they go over again. Now, for Rick's piece, we did use this wonderful program called QLab, which should be a part of this class. If I get around to it, just showing the basics of QLab, because it costs $8 a day. You can get the free version, you can set up, and this is designed for the ancillary things of your stage production, your live event, an immersive environment, a theatrical show, a escape room, things like that. QLab is a must, and we'll try and go back over the cues that we had with Rick, um, and so forth. Here's the last version of that. Let's go to. So this had to run at half an hour, or so an hour, as people gathered in this civic place on a beautiful summer's evening in Colorado, in Denver. Let's preview this structure. Go. That was it. So I'm not going to hit play because, again, it'll go bigger than my screen version. This is what I want you to do for your projection mapping file, your texture video files, and so forth, is to get an idea of intervening in the architecture, in the public feelings, emotions, tones, reactions to a city. These forms of projection mapping are also getting to be audio reactive too. They're often used with audio. I didn't do it on this one, but I could react to the amplitude of what is being played. So there's a real-time interactive response of the scenography to the orchestra. So that is a gig I did with projection mapping. I have used Mad Mapper. My code coach Tommy Martinez once helped me devise a projection mapping program from scratch in the VPL Maximus P. You can use that. Touch Designer, which I'm starting to put brainwaves on, is another program you can build projection mapping from its VPL basics. I think there might be programs out there already made by projection mapping people. It's a growing field, and a lot of people are discovering the fun and relatively low expense of it. As you can, one of my cheapest projectors I got on eBay was $40. Another one, my Casio 2600 lumens, I got used for $140. These things are getting cheap. The expense is in the high lumen bulb. I tend to like to work with 3600 lumens and up. WXGA or XGA, that matters less because I'm composing an environment and I'm competing with street lights, theater lights, things like that. My first exposure to projection mapping happened in Korea, with lighting up the Seoul Tower with a 10,000 lumen projector way back in 2002. There were like 7 of these in the world. 4 of them were in South Korea. So when the Greek Olympics came up in 2004, I think it was, like 6 of them went to the Olympics, 4 from Korea. So I was using that. I later projected in Seoul, Seoul Stadium on another gig, projected in Onori Church in Seoul on another gig, striking fabric, hitting this fabric I designed, and so forth. What is it? What are the deeper meanings? I don't know. I'm aiming at something more than just eye candy or visual muzak. But often, as I said, there's a dialogue with the artistic team, the public, other sorts of people. Are a couple public artists who project, get the coding and things, and project very political statements on monuments. A Polish artist from late 90s, I forget his name, would project on things such as triumphal arches in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and talk about kind of projected politics. Barbara Kruger's famous not for projections, but taking over Times Square and projecting critical consumerist political economic messages in the billboards to run counter to all of the stuff being sold. Projection mapping took way off. It worked on a project where they were actually projection mapping, floating a hologram of a BMW 500 series. Um, uh, Both commerce and artists and theater artists and immersive artists took um, took this new form on, new because the technology exists and the economics have gone way down. My first projector was a wimpy 2000 lumen projector. I forget if it was an Epson or a Bank. Um, and that was $4,000 way back in the year 2000. So these things, this equivalent projector would be like $40, $60 now. You can get the minis, but what you're aiming for is portability, multiple points of entrance. You still have to usually use a laptop, which has to work with the processing speeds and so forth. So there's a push and pull dynamic to this project. So that's the keynote. I'm going to save this to desktop and get out of there. Get out of here and get back to a projection mapping project in North Fork of Long Island with Margarita Espada and her group, this dancers. We had fabrics, we had the observatory, we had 4 or 5 different projectors. We chose architectural items, elements, a couple hundred people there who came to see the concert, dance concert, media projections, so forth. I tried to, well, I did my own graphics, but also find database aesthetics to show the numbers of the world projected on this observatory. The piece was called Constellations. We had performers in front with basic side lighting. This is typical of what you might do for the piece, for any of your devised pieces. Projective map making, and so forth. Here's the dancer. Here's some of the lighting. We re-projected her image against the wall. It was also, I think, a hookup with Mexico City, another group down there. So there's this artistic element of the asynchronous hookup with somewhere else in the world. We're talking about globalism. This is not there. This is a projection mapping, typical of what they might do in Art Tech House. This is in Tokyo somewhere where the water is projection map, but it also has an interactive form with people. There's an infrared camera pointing down so that the water, resembling a waterfall, flows around these objects, people. Not too difficult to do, but takes some coding skills and a good infrared camera. Here's our projection on the observatory dome. We did basic shape projections on the shape of the architecture. The dancers had the images hit their costumes. Their costumes, fortunately or predictively, had sort of large surfaces for these places to hit and to strike. Here's the projection team setting up in the middle of beautiful Long Island, North Fork. The observatory, what town is this near? It's not all the way out there near the Northport, but a couple miles in. And as I said, I often work with dancers for this. Here's my portrait here, projected as the sun goes down. We chose to hit this sonic uh, uh, scope here, and there it is, projected onto that. So we had a total of 4 or 5 different projectors, usually 2 coming from each. We could split images out of it, but we could also strike the surface. So this film was prepared from Mexico, but also we reprojected different elements, what we saw in the field of vision. So it created this lyrical sort of expression of constellations, that stars and human beings have something in relationship, and neurons, that we're all particular. We're all mass created, but then we have a particularity, and so this was an expression of that. So there are some beautiful lyrical things accomplished with this. The film from Mexico was interesting and beautiful, and had an abstraction to it. The fabrics had an abstraction. The ability of our images to be projection mapped onto these discs was wonderful, projecting the cosmos, reflecting the sky, projecting. Here's a great one. So it was busy. Had a couple hundred people in the audience. It was dance, some text, some poems. It was, as Wagner would say, a Gesamtkunstwerk, an altogether art form of these sonic, aural, visual, database, performing aspects together. So here's the lineup of photos. We dealt with hands, dealt with the notion of chaos, notion of order. In one, the order of the dance. Again, these are somewhat dupes. And then we reprojected people back into this surface using the VPL coding and the Max MSP that I'm having you use to make basic code surfaces. We also use these online experiments with Google, things that show databases, wonderful explosive things, movement things, kind of a dialogue with the world in terms of databases, pictures, numbers, graphics, that we hope got across this Gesamtkunstwerk notion to the public. This is what is going on, is what we wanted to say. This is your world not reflected as an abstract, but as a concrete. It looks abstract, but it's very concrete. It relates to numbers. Here is the McLuhan-esque square that I use a lot because it's as old as Aristotle. McLuhan took it and revised it as a methodology for us, giving us a way to talk about what's new. So the transmedia is this Gesamtkunstwerk. It's projection, it's audio, it's dance, it's poetry, it's all these things together. This seems to be a trend, largely because of the economics of projected media. The economics of speakers have come way down, that because of these technological tools have become economically viable to many people. I know a lot of people who own projectors now, and your laptops and what you're able to do with VPLs make these projection mapping programs in Max MSP or in Touch Designer, which I'm trying to chip away at, finding a need and a use for it. QLab, um, and Keynote and PowerPoint. Simple if you're not doing shapes. So, what does it enhance? It audience engagement with the story world. Story world itself, how to tell stories across, excuse me, different mediums. You got all the mediums there. Um, Retrieval, physical engagement, campfire storytelling, like participation, mobility in physical space. Okay, so a new thing like Projected Media Festival. There it is. With dance, with drama, with an orchestra. So it enhances audience engagement. The audience is a part of it. It's usually non-traditional seating. People are milling about outside. What does it retrieve? It retrieves this sense of the campfire. This ancient thing of us sitting around a campfire as early hominids, scared of the world, trying to make sense of the world, and we're telling stories with the fire in front of us. Many new revisionist thinkings of the development of us as a savanna hominid revolve around cooking the food, greater calories to the brain, beginnings of social connectivity, social sharing, oral traditions, storytelling, fires and calories, scaring wild animals off. This is the resonance on this shamanic level of projected media, doing media in spaces, and so forth. Which is very profound if you stop to think about the primitive aspects of going to an event, public event, and seeing projection, hearing audio, seeing all this technologically advanced things, but realizing this isn't anything new. This is why you're transformed. Nature's on the outside. It can kill you. It's dangerous. You're a part of nature. You're not abstracted. You're inserted into nature as a savanna hominid. You've invented and shared through the generation this thing called fire. Fire is treated vegetables and meat, so now our stomachs got smaller. We didn't have to have larger stomachs to digest all of these plants or continue to munch away at them as gorillas do. Um, and so that transformed that. The transition from burning meat increased our calories, which meant possibility of larger brains that burn a lot of calories. The working brain is a furnace of calories, and so forth. Okay, what did this transmedia, this Gesamtkunstwerk, what we're specifically talking about is projected media. What did it reverse? Fictions become reality. Okay, so like an ancient campfire, as these savanna hominids are secured something near a tree, as the forest dried up and disappeared under climate change, they could start a fire. All the nocturnal predators, the big cats and the big dogs, were circling it. They didn't know what they were saying. They were seeing these strange animals that they wanted for a meal, sitting around this fire that they kept going. So the fictions that we told each other as storytellings at these campfires extended out. And so there is a magical thing that when we're in a theater, when we're seeing a movie, when we're seeing basically a story, and we enter into it as if this is reality, this is a function of society. The function of propaganda from a society, how to continue, how to pass knowledge along, how to not be fearful of nature, how to deal with the nature within, what is the relationship between males and females to continue and propagate their species. Simple things like this resonate out from this new technological thing called projection mapping. Um, Complete full sensory immersion in the story world. This is our tech house, which takes projection mapping and deals with every surface except the ceiling. On the ceilings, they have, I think the New York space, they told me about $3 million worth of Sony, no, Epson projectors that are high lumened, ultra short throw. I'm now looking at ultra short throw projectors, which 4,000 lumen projector will still run me $3,000, and that's ultra short throw. So you get rid of the illusion of a projector high in the air, diagonally slicing across to get a big image. Your shadow is in front, breaking the illusion. As we see here is exactly what Brecht was warning against. Fiction becomes reality. What fiction? Delusional fictions, violent, skewed fictions, things like that. This is, again, we see this response to stories. Hey, I don't like that. Hey, this is propaganda. Oh no, this consolidates the tribe. We see a resonance again with the public projection that it could alter images. I usually try and design and start with strong images, and then the committees usually chew that down because it's dangerous to project discursive things in the public. Complete full sensory. Okay, what is this projection as transmedia? This projection event, this Gesamtkunstwerk in the house create. It obsolesces linear storytelling. A guy or girl, shaman, whatever, around the campfire, just saying, I'm the person you've designated to tell the story, the bardic sort of person. Hear me out. It obsolesces that. A machine runs it. It could be AI. I used database projections, database feeds. We had one live, but it was tough to find live database feeds pumping the real numbers into the whole experience. I still think is a unique idea of getting over this reversal thing here where fictions become reality. What about reality becoming fictions? You see the number of hunger or politics or terrorism or war or whatever around the world. It can be pumped in. Something as banal as TikTok use. You can pump those numbers in because the internet is now the medium of these numbers. But it tends to chip away at linear storytelling, which is the movies. I flicked on Netflix of late, and these stories are also formulaic, high production values. But I just, there's a collision here. There's a collision between the 7-second attention span of the human being, which a goldfish has 8 seconds, to the ability to tell a linear story, whether you're reading War and Peace, Notes from the Underground by Dostoevsky, or even the Iliad or the Odyssey. We tend to, or seeing a Quentin Tarantino film like Pulp Fiction, which jumps around the story and people are killed before you build an empathy. You build an empathy with them, they're killed, you want to keep thinking they're not dead yet. So Tarantino plays with stylized violence, stylized time, stylized aspects of linear storytelling, kind of predating just barely the internet and what that's doing to us in our ability to jump around. Singular story platforms, it's getting rid of movies. During COVID, we saw this where people, the movie theaters were closed down. One of the last films I saw before the shutdown, it was barely a month before, was the World War One film 1918 with huge production values. And like the Hitchcock movie Rope, it had an utter devotion to the linearity of these two couriers making their way across the no man's land in northern France, the trenches, the deadly trenches of World War One, one of the deadliest mass sort of slaughters still in history. There's a million casualties in the Battle of the Somme. Things we can't even think about, sending men into these slaughter fields. This was a story before COVID, high production values. God, I forget the English director's name. Taking these couriered messages because the phone lines, the primitive phone lines, have been cut by artillery. So two soldiers had to volunteer and run and give the message that the Germans had relocated their positions and they were setting up a trap for the English. This film, I was looking for the seams in this film. This film ran through in the afternoon, through a night, out the other end, into dawn before the attack, and one of the couriers made it through. Here's my point. I saw it at the Nighthawk Theater in Brooklyn, Windsor Terrace, on the corner there. It was a big screen. I knew this was going to be a cinematic experience. I know that my vision is 120 degrees as a savanna primate, developed from swinging from branch to branch, into becoming a predator, which predators have their eyes in front, but still enough of the 120. Sat down in the middle. I had read that this is a continuous, just like this, linear storytelling. This was resolute linear storytelling. So this was to the T. There's as if the camera's not stopping, as if the camera is the third courier going with these two soldiers mostly across this empty landscape where the Germans had retreated. Incredibly interesting experience before most of this was shut down due to COVID, and we had to return to our little screens for the first time in our history. And be quarantined and get our reality from these little screens, cutting off the enhancement of audience engagement, story world itself, how to tell stories across different mediums. This is also why I'm using this spatial I/O as a VR form to tell this story, and so forth. What else does it obsolesce? It didn't. At that movie, I'm seeing the big World War One story. Everyone's production values. I'm seduced into thinking I'm there. I'm the camera, the third courier traveling with these two soldiers across this dangerous landscape. Spoiler alert, one is killed by a downed German pilot. Soldiers are sent in. He comes across an abandoned French or Flemish town with bodies floating in the local water. The carnage in World War One is a carnage of mass-produced scale. I'm living now in this beautiful English Garden City house called Seaside Village in Bridgeport, built for the Remington factory, to which Remington at one point made 50% of the world's bullets. So this again all relate. It's like a tree with roots. I'm seeing the manifest. This movie about a war that was horrendous. It was totally about boots on the ground before we got planes in the air or other form or nuclear warheads or what we think are deterrences. What we see again in the Ukrainian invasion. And gang, the reason why I keep talking about these so-called ancillary things, which are not really, these are the roots to the tree. These are what the nourishment the tree gets is from the soil and water of the ground, which is our desires, our abilities, our failed notion of progress, all of these things. I watch this film. It's 2 hours long, reflective of a whole night, condensed. Camera doesn't stop. just like rope, which is about the rope they used to strangle their classmate in their little social experiment, like Leopold and Loeb. And then at the end, climax, the whole linearity of the trenches, that they go nowhere, that there was how many miles of trench? There was 6 million miles of barbed wire. There's linearity of the machine gun, which shoots out 600 bullets a minute. So a position of 12 German machine gun crews could hold off a whole division of 9,000 troops, English troops. Just numbers that we haven't seen. So I'm sitting here on the edge of COVID, watching this film, expecting to be immersed, expecting to be carried by the implied pedagogy that the movie was trying to make about the efforts of two guys, one who doesn't make it, the other who does, and then they've got to save a whole division of Englishmen from marching into a trap. The final scene is where the guy runs counter to the trenches, which there are enough trenches in northern France and Flanders, Ypres, all along that border to circle the world like 4 times, something like that. Trenches are linear, they're meant for protection, but they also become part of this dangerous boots on the ground environment. I'm watching a guy run to inform the general to stop the assaults. It was satisfying. It was millions of dollars to make this film. The production values were consummate. The storytelling was simple. It's no art cinema. But I was seduced into seeing this ultra linear film. Okay, this is the handy square we use in talking about enhance, retrieve, enhance, what a media enhances. Media's like CRISPR, media's like the light bulb, media's like the washing machine. All of these things that the media of cell phones enhance and transform a society. Here it is again, virtual instructor LED. This is what I became a month later. I extend reach. I obsolesce face-to-face training. I reverses Zoom fatigue, and it retrieves school of the air. Remote communities in Australia have been schooled by two-way related places. So we have, maybe just like trench warfare, we have, miles of these Zoom meetings across the world in which we emerge from these little portals, which were supposedly about a slice of our reality. You're taking this class now about the reality of instruction, college-based instruction, but here I'm in a series of 50 plus videos. I'm giving you the lecture forms for this. Again, the semiotic square. Again, the dance. I just pumped all these things back in. And it was satisfying. This was a portal. 200 people emerged in the night in the North Fork, came into it. I've asked you guys to. So here's the picture coming out. The roots. The old school system was designed as a pyramid scheme where energies focused upward toward the king, toward the pharaoh, toward the emperor, toward even the president, the oligarchy. This grand pyramid scheme did not focus on the usefulness of current sustainable infrastructure, but became a type of future speculation of the self robbing from the future to pay the present. Houses, education, all of that. Technology emerged like projection mapping, which makes telling new stories with new media really viable. But where are we going to do this? This system is not just industrial or post-industrial service economy. It retains strong influence from the beginnings of agrarian culture with toil, kings, priestly classes, necessity and scarcity, to conduct information. Misinformation, coercion, herd mentalities, bullying, authority addictions are nodes of conduct to basic information. Storytelling. Can we use these things another way to tell these stories without propaganda? Can, like Brecht said, can we tell these stories to make greater sense? Religions used to be an alternative systems to communication, imaginary worlds, as we said in the early transmedia, switching reality for illusion. Fiction and reality had this thing. The great religious architecture of the world is purposed to do this, to make people think that certain fictions are a reality through ritual, through the beauty of these structures, through the devotion, economic devotion it took to build the great northern French Romanesque cathedrals as early economic projects in monetary and fiscal policy. You need when the peasants aren't in the field, they need to be in the winter making these cathedrals, much like the pyramids, much like other big, the pyramids in Mexico, big projects. Mobile telematics, our ability to use projected media, ability to use our cell phones, the ability to channel into the database aesthetics, getting the numbers from the world and expressing this in pretty graphics, compelling graphics with the same old hit in the gut I said that design must convey in half a second, are big. With our phone and a sense of autonomy with the phone, we can break this 5,000-year-old hierarchy that we always pay up, hoping to gain that position in the pyramid scheme, when we just dust ourselves off and realize that $70,000 a year for a substandard education in a safe space of a New England college has been a total waste. That we could have, as Asimov said, the best that any institution can do is teach you to be an autodidact. We realize that we have bought into this system without being aware of it. Brecht says, don't be seduced by this interchangeability between illusion and reality, as old as the campfire itself. Telling the stories in front of the campfire. I don't know if one turned to the other and said, but don't forget those big cats and big dogs who wanted to make a dinner of us tonight. Keep that fire moving. This is the imperative to conduct the long tail of all of this. Spike in technology, spike in programs, mid-century warmongering, plus the Depression, creates these spikes, these crisis moments, these bell curves. And on the other temporal side of the bell curve has this thing called the power law, or the long tail. I think I indicated it. That this is what the internet is actually munching away at. You get your job listing is on Indeed, on LinkedIn, munching away at this landscape of possible jobs. You get your house on Zillow. You find your roommate on Roomie. You look for your college. You look for your classes. You probably looked at my classes, my stats, and thought, what's illusion and what's reality? I could tell you what my reality is, how I think of it, and it's probably very different from what you did as a decision to get into this. This is a life of long tail after 5,000 years of cycle coming to a completion, not through the tools itself, projectors, cell phones, database feeds, but through the comparison of lateral information on how to sustain. Projection mapping doesn't happen everywhere. You now need codes. When drones came out, they hit a bell curve, and now the authorities put a lot of regulations on the bigger drones. So every new technology has its attendant bureaucrats behind it. This is life in the long tail of human dignity and possibility. If we are peasants, if we have to go because we're curious to 1918 and see a big movie using all the best of cinematic technology. If we go to Denver Public Center, downtown Denver, and watch a projection map on a wall, we are munching away at the long tail. We're part of this surge that we felt the surge in and with the very interesting time, the COVID dealing. We had Trump and then we had Biden. What are the politics of the vaccination? Was this what it felt like we returned to that campfire? Like what is the reality about this virus? Where did it come from? Where is it going? Is it part of our life? Is very similar to the campfire of the savannah-based Homo sapien. This will start a new respect for lateral information in energy and education as a tools to dismantle the hierarchies. Hopefully, it already is. But we are pack animals. We are basically hives. These Homo sapiens, these hominids, are more hive-oriented than most of the so-called great apes. We depend on sociability to extend knowledge, starting with the recurring generational invention of the fire, also of making hand axes, and that continues throughout the world. And we shall continue this lecture on projection mapping.